Our next speaker, Dr. Alon Goshen Gottstein, really in any forum related to interreligious dialogue, really almost automatically has to include Dr. Alon Goshen Gottstein as a scholar and as an educator. He is the head of the Elijah School, promoting interreligious dialogue between the world religions. He is a scholar and expert in Jewish theology as it concerns the interreligious encounter, the author of over 20 authored or edited books. As a matter of fact, one very exciting book that just is coming out now, or has come out now actually, and will be present in paperback, and he'll probably mention that. His topic will be, was Rabbi Sacks interested in other religions? Okay, please.
I begin with an unconventional moment. On Sunday, I called Hanoch, one of the conference's co-organizers. I told him, Hanoch, I've just had an operation. I just come out of hospital. I am feeling a total wreck. I don't think I can come to the conference. So he said, Alon, wait till Wednesday. So here I am, and happy to be able to deliver this talk. And I've decided, by way of acknowledging this fact, rather than going to a synagogue and having Birkat HaGomel interrupted by the Gabbai who's trying to figure out who's going to get the next Aliyah, to say Birkat HaGomel here, because this is a community of study, of Torah Sheba'al Peh, and if I was able to come out of hospital in order to be able to deliver this, what better opportunity to acknowledge this and give thanks to God. Hallelujah. Odeh Adonai b'chol levav, besod yesharim ve'eda, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, הגומל לחייבים טובות, שגמלני כל טוב. So I came out of hospital full of energy, and I've just run the Jonathan Sacks intellectual marathon. I am the last one in the marathon. And there's a kind of ambivalence about being last in the marathon, because the last one in the marathon, so to speak, has lost the race. On the other hand, the last one has in fact succeeded in running the marathon, which is also an achievement. So what I suggest, therefore, is that given the fact that the official time for this conference is over, I declare the conference over, and let's just see this as an after party. I'll be sharing with you from a forthcoming book coming out in the Littman Library titled Covenant and World Religions. Obviously, the title Covenant and World Religions is an echo of Sacks. The book studies Sacks and Greenberg, echoed here previously by Tanya and others, on their attitude to world religions and Jewish theology of religions. There are flyers out there for reduction. Anyone who survives this after party can get another 10%. And I will try to offer some insights on a question that was framed. What's the title of the talk?
Your title is, was Rabbi Sacks interested in other religions?
Was Rabbi Sacks interested in other religions? Which my cousin said, it's like asking whether the Pope is Catholic. So the question really is the question equivalent or not? And you can determine this in the space of the next 35 minutes, because this after party can now go on.
20 minutes for you.
Oh.
Everyone gets 20.
Oh.
As a matter of fact, they all took less than 20, but you'll get the full 20.
Oh. I guess my humor didn't work. Okay. So, all right. I've already discussed this book, and we had a session on it as part of the World Congress of Jewish Studies. And some people thought I would repeat the paper I gave there. I'm not going to repeat the paper I gave there. I will, however, signal some of the points that arose in that particular conversation. I discussed at the session the question of how, in fact, while being a champion of interfaith relations, Sacks actually avoids engagement with the specific content of other religions. He does not cite sources of other faiths. there's a level of engagement of other religions that comes with a certain kind of interfaith that he didn't practice, advocating an alternative, and I'm not going to repeat that talk here. Both that talk and this talk are part of the forthcoming book. I explored the reasons for it, one of which is ideological. Is this due to Soloveitchik? And I ruled against that possibility. I favored a psychological reading, going to his particular temperament, his biography, his personality, what he felt comfortable, and how within the limits of his personal comfort he went much farther than one might have expected in creating new patterns for interfaith engagement while nevertheless avoiding a certain kind of engagement. I'm going to illustrate this just with one quote and a brief reflection, and then move into the body of today's presentation. So here's the quote. I have to say, imagine Sacks now, yeah? I have to say, although, may I mention the Archbishop of Canterbury, or is it just one for public consumption? It all, shall we say, that the Archbishop of Canterbury at the moment, like his predecessors, with whom I work very closely, George Carey and Rowan Williams, so Justin Welby is actively engaged in trying to do this right now, to bring religious leaders, take them out of the conflict zone, because once you're in the conflict zone, you know, tempers flare. Just take them out. Get them not necessarily to agree on anything, but get them to become friends. Because sometimes when religious leaders, when Jews and Muslim and Christian leaders come together with a very inflamed population, but they are seen to be standing together, that can send a very powerful message on the street. And sometimes to do that, you have to take time now to create friendships that will be warm enough to be able to use when you need them. It's just taking early action to create this. Here's the quote. Sacks's interest in interfaith are on the whole civic. He harnesses religion to address present-day global challenges, religious violence and tension, and the legitimate place of religious and cultural diversity are his concerns. Notable is the home we build. Time and again in that book, one notes in this work how encounter across religions, the relationships constructed among religious leaders, are important for their civic benefits, for the peace, law, and order they bring to society, not for the spiritual or pedagogic value they might carry in and of themselves. As a result, all appeal to religion plays down the specifically religious potential of an encounter and features its civic benefits instead. When religious leaders gather or appear in public together, rather than recognize the religious dimensions of the encounter and its broader promise, the civic elements are prioritized at the expense of the religious dimension. Conscious avoidance of the religious dimension of the encounter is complemented by the recommendation for side-by-side common action that serves society, rather than the more direct and dialogically related activities that are characterized as face-to-face. In a word, and I think this is true of his entire oeuvre, concerning interreligious thought, Sacks's interest is not in religions. It is in the members of the religion. It is not in the faith. It is in the human person, the image of God, who is part of that faith. This is not just a matter of Sacks's theory. I believe this is actually how he practiced interfaith. It is a practice that privileges people, friendship, and contribution to society over engaging the content and substance of other religions in their difference. Yet, Sacks's thought contains a vision that is far broader than his own practice, and I'd like to explore that tension here. As I argued in the talk in the summer, in many ways, Sacks allows us to do as he says, not as he does. He opens a path by virtue of his ideas, even if not by virtue of his personal example. So I'd like to explore this tension as it emerges from some of his writings. Sacks is broadly considered a champion of interfaith relations. Chava Tirosh Samuelson, who I learned yesterday was the one person that Sacks had wanted to take part in this particular conference, a brilliant author. Her most recent brilliant piece of writing is the blurb she wrote for my forthcoming book. She's a savvy and discerning professor of Jewish philosophy. She devoted the volume to Sacks that she spoke about earlier today when she presented her presentation. It is worth noting how she perceives of Sacks based on the dignity of difference and other sources that inform my own presentation. Chava, that's how I call her, relates that in his work, Sacks makes the bold claim that to face the pressing challenges of our time, we need not only the great religious traditions, but a way to bring their wisdom into dialogue with one another. Bring their wisdom into dialogue with one another. In other words, rather than the alternative emphasis of all religions contributing their respective wisdom for the benefit of society, Sacks, in her understanding, is a proponent of a direct exchange of wisdom between religions in the interest of society's pressing needs. Similarly, according to her, Sacks teaches that each tradition needs to find, not simply tolerate, the positive value in the diversity of the other. We just heard about that. Note, Tirosh does not refer to legitimating diversity as a principle, but to the active quest to identify the positive value in the diversity that is particular to another tradition. This would involve a process of mutual study, interrogation, listening, and sharing. In similar vein, she attributes to Sacks the claim that since all humans are created in God's image, we must see the beauty and wisdom in faiths not our own. While she's able to offer references in support of these views, Sacks never develops these flashes of inspiration into more detailed expositions, let alone into a program. More importantly, he provides no modeling for a path that might be attributed to him. Sacks's brilliant formulations are rich with potential. The message she hears may well be the core of his message, but it is not a message that he in fact acts on. So let's explore how this finds expression in the books. I begin with Dignity of Difference. The heart of the issue is the relationship between the universal and the particular, what religions share in common and the differences that set them apart. Sacks has established an important balance between the two, by means of which particularity and difference are appreciated alongside universality and commonality. However, what Sacks has left unresolved is the question of whether we appreciate the other for what is common or for what is different. Granted, Sacks has devised a structure that validates and calls for respect of difference. However, is acceptance ultimately contingent on commonality? And if so, is difference tolerated, legitimated, or is it a source of further inspiration and enrichment across the divide established by difference? If otherness, the actual difference, is not really engaged, then we are left with a superficial view of the other that makes no room for a genuine encounter. While it may suffice for a distant recognition and acceptance of the other, it certainly cannot provide a foundation for real relationships that engage the fullness of individuals or communities in their particularity. Superficial engagement cannot deliver the depth of healing that is sought in interreligious relations. The structure of Sacks's thought points to learning and enrichment across religions as the fruit of appreciating particularity and valuing difference. In fact, Sacks is explicit in his call for learning across religions, while never speaking against it in early work. This emphasis is already found earlier in his work, before the Dignity of Difference. One of the earliest occurrences, Tradition and Non-Traditional Age. In an essay there he speaks of the multiplicity of languages, Tower of Babel, and then he finishes the discussion of Tower of Babel by saying, learning one another's language of faith is one of the ways we reach back before Babel. Beautiful quote. Learning one another's language of faith is one of the ways we reach back before Babel. And yet, as the essay there unfolds, Sacks moves the discussion from actual engagement of the other's faith to the common moral message that Jews and Christians have to offer society at large. This transition encapsulates the phenomena that I describe. A potential breadth of theological vision is channeled into ethical and civic concerns to which multiple religions contribute, while avoiding the very kind of dialogue envisioned in light of his biblical idea. Let's look at dignity of difference. There are two fundamental strategies for affirming difference, and these correspond to the two versions of dignity of difference. First version presents a diversity that is rooted in God. In its most extreme form, it spoke of God relating to religions as revelation. It also referred to other religions as the human calling out to God and of recognizing God's image. Second edition shifted the grounds for justifying diversity. Against the common background of the Noahide laws, it spoke of human and cultural diversity, grounding diversity in the human person rather than in God. This is in line with Sacks's major emphasis on the centrality of the image of God as a core message of Torah, and one that also conditions the attitude to different religions. Now, is the purpose of Sacks's constructs simply to affirm as legitimate the existence of other religions? Or does such affirmation amount to an invitation to engage with them in reciprocal processes of learning and spiritual sharing? There are different ways the argument could be made. I'm not going to look into all sides. I just want to put one side of the argument that shows that if you look at his argument, the consequence should have been engaging other religions, a conclusion not reached by him or not practiced by him. So version 1. If diversity is truly God-given and has its roots in God, then this amounts to an invitation to engage the religion of the other. The fullness of God finds expression in the fullness of religious paths. Judaism's challenge, as Sacks states, is not to find God within itself, but to find him in the other. If we seek the fullness of God, then potentially there's something to receive in every religion. If in the process of affirming the validity of other religions, Sacks suggests that all religions are needed to reveal the fullness of God, then he's also suggesting that no one religion can bring one to fullness of knowledge of God, so something will remain beyond one's comprehension, contained in the other's religion. Now let's look at the alternative method. The grounds for religious diversity lie in the human person and humanity's religious aspirations. So you could say that a God grounding of religious diversity amounts to an invitation to share across religions, to discover the riches of God, while grounding diversity in the human person would limit such engagement. Human diversity requires multiple approaches to God, but these stem from the inbuilt diversity of the human race.
Well, I guess not that much diversity respect here.
Yeah. Given this, I don't know, I'm after a long day, nobody else seems to have minded. Given this diversity, there's no need for one, I'll cut parts of the paper, Beth, don't worry. Given this diversity, there's no need for one part of humanity to follow in the spiritual ways of another, emerging as they are from this prior diversity. The argument would seem to hold, but still holds the possibility of inspiration across religions. If we recognize the fullness of humanity in its very diversity, and all the more so if we consider this diversity to be an expression of the ideal of God's image in humanity, then in fact, getting to know another spiritual path could also be seen as a way of delving more deeply into our humanity. I don't think Sacks ever argues that the common Noahide foundations exhaust our common humanity. If he calls for the dignity of difference, he is in fact urging us to appreciate the other precisely for the other's particularity. Grounding such particularity in the diversity of humanity, cast in the image of God, could lead us to a quest to understand more deeply all that makes us human, and with that, the depths of human aspirations to God as they find full expression in religious diversity. 1 second, I need to talk to the chair.
No, you started at
5:30
all right, we'll go according to your thing.
Yeah,
What
okay.
time do you have till?
43, I have 7 minutes.
Okay.
Remember also we have the students here from this interreligious program who've come, so it would be nice to get them involved.
I would like to, but, he's running the show now. So.
No,
You're running the show.
I just want my 20 minutes. All I want is my 20 minutes. We're not even close to it.
Okay, so
Okay.
you're finishing at 7?
I'll finish on 20 minutes after I begin.
No, not 20 minutes from now, 20 minutes from when you began.
Oh, okay. Okay. In many statements, Sacks gives a clear indication of the ideal of mutual learning, sharing, and inspiration. These statements push us further to consider the relationship between his theoretical and inspirational saying and his own practices. Listen to these beautiful quotes. Each culture has something to contribute. Each person knows something no one else does. The sages said, "Who is wise? One who learns from all men." The wisest is not one who knows himself wiser than others. He is one who knows all men have some share of the truth and is willing to learn from them. For none of us knows all the truth, and each one of us knows some of it. So willingness to learn from others is a sign of wisdom. The search for truth or for wisdom passes through the study of other religions. The same applies to calls as the following. Can we hear the voice of God in a language, a sensibility, a culture not our own? Sacks seems to be inviting us to actually listen to God's voice through the particularity of the other's culture and religion. In this line of reasoning, mutual enrichment is the positive outcome of appreciating indifference. So while the theory is set in place, one must ask, does Sacks exemplify it? I'm going to cut a paragraph that repeats the same idea in 7 different ways. So the answer to me is that he does not exemplify it. He does not implement the idea, and to a large extent, he deflects from it. His role, and let me quote the conclusion of To Heal a Fractured World. This has been a religious book, a Jewish book. Each of us has a contribution to make, whether we are religious or secular, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, whether we represent the great non-Western traditions or more modern forms of spirituality. All I've aspired to do in this book is to articulate one voice in the conversation, knowing that no human voice can express the totality of wisdom and that there is none from which we cannot learn. Well, who is the this who we cannot learn? We sitting in the classroom? Certainly. The world at large? Certainly. But Sacks himself is the teacher. He's the one who brings the Jewish voice to others. I'm unable to find in his work any occasion in which he's implementing the call that he's issuing to listen to the other, to integrate the wisdom of the other, to make that part of his message. He is the great teacher. He's not necessarily the great learner of religions. And here the great question arises, how is it that this genius of a man, who was a walking encyclopedia, and what Josh narrated earlier from the talks with Joanna, makes it even more prominent. In other words, he knows everything, but he doesn't seem to know the religions. He knows philosophy, he knows contemporary social thought, he knows pop culture, he knows everything, but he doesn't know religions. When you look what religions are, the most superficial presentations of other religions. I'm not going to go into this right now. Where is this gap coming from, and why is it not implemented? So I'm going to skip an entire page, and I'm going to conclude with a section. Yeah, I can do it. I'm going to conclude with a section on how I see what is ultimately his approach to God, his spirituality, and why I think that he could envision something that he didn't himself implement. What is it that really prevents Sacks from the kind of engagement he is perfectly capable of imagining? I'd like to suggest that at the root of it is a deeper reservation with regards to theology, religious experience, and how God is known. The root of Sacks's hesitancy, if we may refer to it thus, may go to the very foundation of how he knows God and how he affirms religion, both within Judaism and in relation to the other. If so, the unfulfilled potential may be accounted for in terms that straddle psychology and epistemology. We might refer to it as his particular spirituality. He knows God in very particular ways, and those ways either preclude or make it unnecessary to engage the depth of the religious experience and knowledge of the other, whom Sacks seeks to affirm. Here's the passage. People within the Abrahamic monotheisms have always known that for most of us, most of the time, God, more infinite than the universe, older and younger than time, cannot be known directly. He is known mainly through his effects, and of these, the most important is his effect on human lives. That is what I sensed on meeting the Lubavitcher Rebbe and Rabbi Soloveitchik. In them it was obvious. It is why they commanded so much respect within the American Jewish community. But over the years, I have learned to find it so much more widely in communities that care, in the kindness of strangers, in people who touch our lives, perhaps only momentarily, doing the deed or saying the word that carries us to safety across the abyss of loneliness or self-doubt. It is where I find God in Jewish history. There is a grandeur, a nobility, a heroic passion about Jews that does not seem to come naturally to this fractious, quarrelsome, stiff-necked people. But you have to be very narrow indeed not to see beauty and wisdom in faiths other than your own. I've been inspired by seeking Sikhs offering hospitality to the poor in Amritsar, Christians building homes for the homeless throughout the world, Hindus practicing sewa, that's service, compassion to the distressed, by the majestic wisdom of the great Chinese Confucian Taoist traditions, and the courage of the many Muslims I know who fight the extremists in their own communities. The statement that every human being is in God's image precedes both the universal covenant with Noah and the particular with Abraham, to tell us that our humanity precedes our religious identity, whatever that identity may be. And now the final paragraph. Yep, okay. On the face of it, this is a very open and outgoing quote. It relates not only to Abrahamic religions, but to others. I note especially the reference to Sikhs, met in Amritsar, a visit I had the honor to facilitate myself. Elaine remembers that. And that has left a deep enough impression upon Sacks to figure here and elsewhere. Yet what this passage relates to us is that Sacks is neither a mystic nor a philosopher in the old sense. God is not known to him directly, experientially, mystically. He is known to him in and through people. This is as true of the two great teachers who shaped his life and set him on his path, as it is of the many religious leaders and communities he met along the way. In both cases, God is known through the image of God. The human person takes precedence in experiential and ultimately theoretical terms over God as direct object of relationship and knowledge. The shift from God to God image is, in this new insight, not simply a matter of compromising the radical views of the dignity of difference. It goes to the core of Sacks' spirituality. It is a spirituality that passes through the human person and human relations. From this perspective, the kinds of ideals that Sacks set forth as worthy of appreciation, members of other religions and ideals that make mutual study and encounter mostly superfluous, make sense in their own way. Thank you very much.
Just a few thoughts. First of all, I had a Chevruta, a Torah study partner, who once said that when you recall the words and the memory of a great man, it's as if he is speaking from the grave. So I believe that through the three messengers here, we have something of not only what Rabbi Sacks said, but what he might continue to say through these interpretations and the experiences of our three really distinguished panelists. In terms of my own students and Professor Reinhold, I think you and I would agree as educators at this university that every student should have the opportunity to participate in at least one international conference while they are doing their BA, right?
Only if you're paying.
No, you're paying. Well, I had dinner last night, but that was good. Okay. I'm looking at the faces of my students, and they're taking it in, and they'll remember this. They'll remember the refreshments, and they'll remember the sense of dignity and everything that is so exciting. The only other thing is when you go to your first international conference, you give your first paper, and then you remember that, etc. Anyway. A number of themes. We're delighted to hear a number of questions or comments from the audience. Short comments, short questions. We have about 15 minutes for this. And in terms of the students in my class, it really mirrors what we've talked about, consistently. Mutual respect, self-respect, mutual enrichment, which I think was a theme, and becoming better of what you are, better Jew, better Christian, better Muslim. And being yet open to the other, but becoming more dedicated to your own faith tradition. So, anyone, and I particularly welcome anyone from my class as well. Don't be shy. I mean, it took a lot of...
Is it true, Ben, you're giving them an extra 10% if they ask a question?
Well, I'm a conflict resolution.
Yes,
we have
that's
to,
a yes.
No,
That's a yes.
we have to negotiate, No, they were afraid to take the Danish, so they're even more afraid that. But yes, I will give you the incentive. Yes. Participation definitely counts. Okay, there was a lady here. Yeah. Can you just raise your voice and maybe introduce yourself? Introduce yourself briefly and raise your voice.
My name is Brina and I'm a student here at Bar-Ilan University. Anyway, my question is about sibling rivalry, and in the specific cases that were mentioned in the Torah, does it not seem that it actually emanates from parents or even God's preference to one sibling over another, and that's the core of the problem and not the actual sibling rivalry? For example, Joseph and his brother, it's clear that Jacob had a clear preference for Joseph, and he showed it by, giving him that cloth, that special object that he made for him, and in other cases as well.
Yeah, that's yours.
Thank you so much for this great question. I think that when Rabbi Sacks approaches the Bible, he approaches it through rabbinic commentaries. And so what he does, for instance, in the case of Jacob and Esau, it is written there, Rav Oved Sa'ir. The elder will serve the younger. But in the beautiful exegesis, he says you can read it from right to left, but also from left to right. So the question is, who is serving who? You see how he is working in his hermeneutics, and in that way he builds a dialogical hermeneutics, and he deems that already in the Bible, these preferences are, so to say, viewed in another way, because you can't build a covenant on a deceit. And therefore, he interprets Rav Oved Sa'ir, the elder will serve the younger, in that way that he says it could be vice versa. So you can read it in the other way. Who will serve who? In that sense, he builds a dialogical hermeneutics that is not built upon a specific belonging, but it is built upon belonging to the entire world, which needs dialogue and reconciliation. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Please.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to ask...
Just introduce yourself.
I'm Sam Liebens, from the University of Haifa. And I wanted to ask a question about the last presentation from Rabbi Goshen Gottstein. we know that absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, right? So it's true, it's noteworthy that Rabbi Sacks does, he quotes many more non-religious thinkers than maybe theologians. First of all, it's not true, there's no non-Jewish theologians quoted. I was trying to find just now a theologian, a Christian theologian, he quotes about the Yugoslavian war and what he learned about the God of love and God of hatred from that. And certainly he'd read C.S. Lewis and was aware of Anglican philosophy and theology. There's no way he didn't have a familiarity with scholastic Christian philosophy and Muslim medieval philosophy, at least enough to understand the Jewish medieval philosophers because they were all in conversation with one another. I remember being at a reception at his house and at Lady Lane's house for Jewish and Hindu students and community leaders, and he seemed very conversant, like he had some understanding of the basic Hindu culture to he was speaking. I would suggest, therefore, a very different explanation is that specifically as the chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, he felt very much as he was a spokesperson for Judaism, and that there may have been some reticence to speak on behalf of other religions.
I think he wants me to respond, Miriam.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
Did you not want me to respond, Sam?
Yeah, that's for you. Absolutely.
So, I agree with everything you're saying. When I first raised the question, when I first raised this thesis, Eliot said that it had to do with the office, that someone who was the chief rabbi or aspiring to be the chief rabbi would be out of form to cite other religions. I can offer counter testimony. I mean, I myself organized meetings in which was an active participant and fully engaged, which means he absolutely had the capacity to do so. And yet I think the gap is a meaningful. It's borne out also by the testimony of other religious leaders with whom he participated, notably the Archbishop of Canterbury, who clearly states the lack of interest and lack of any real theological or religious interest in his faith, even in his closest interfaith partner.
Where is that?
It's in the book.
I'm saying, did the Archbishop state that in print?
In the book. It's coming out in 3 months. You want to buy it. There's a reduction. So in other words, this is borne out by the testimony of his partners, by the structure of his thought, and I don't think it can be simply dismissed that way. What Josh showed us earlier, how he could take David Constance's work. There's no reason he couldn't have done that, especially after he retired from the position of chief rabbi. Part of the problem after retiring, he adopted another voice. He adopted an Abrahamic voice. Okay, he no longer spoke for Judaism. He spoke for Abrahamic faith. Well, then the opportunity should have been even stronger to engage, to work, to collaborate, to draw insights. He speaks for Abrahamic religions from a Jewish biblical reading, which he then makes into something Abrahamic.
There's a difference. He specifically invites other religions.
Okay.
I cited that.
All right, listen.
This is the conundrum.
I have to assert some. I'm sorry, less than democratic means here. The only thing I would say, by the way, in terms of that, and I'll call on you. I just didn't see you. Is that look? As someone who was involved in the area of conflict resolution, I kind of understand that. Meaning that we're not having theological discussion for the sake of theological discussion. We are trying to connect with each other, okay? So you can call it a pragmatic or applied approach, okay? The world is burning, there's this 9/11, there are things, okay? I'm not going to sit around and discuss the nuances of your faith and my faith. We have to come to some type of appreciation of each other to calm the passions and create a conducive environment. Okay, please.
Okay, yes. It's something actually to you. Something a little bit subversive, but I hope you'll like me afterwards anyway.
Your university, that's what we're supposed to do.
I would like to encourage the students not to strive too much to be such good Jews and such good Muslims and such good Christians. Sometimes it's really very productive to be just a good enough Muslim or a good enough Christian or a good enough Jew. And then for your research, and this is also especially for the young women researchers among you, that corresponds also to your observation. Whom do we meet and whom do we engage with on the other side? So when you're not that comfortable in your own tradition or with parts of your own tradition, you have a great chance to meet others who are also not that comfortable and who are very often the creative thinkers, the critical thinkers, and this is how you meet them. Tamar Ross' book is an amazing example of that. Whom you meet when you're in your tradition and critical of that tradition, and then you meet many, and also you don't meet only men religious leaders. You meet also then creative women thinkers of other theological traditions, and yeah.
Good, thank you.
I hope it didn't destroy you.
Well, it would take a while. You'd have to work harder than that to destroy whatever. But I want the students to have fun also, okay? I mean, it's been said that fanatics don't have a sense of humor, okay? And I think the students now have a fairly decent sense of humor, right? You believe that? Okay. Okay, fine. Okay, please, sir, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Lawrence Kaplan. I spoke earlier. First of all, I think it's ironic that Rabbi Soloveitchik, who was opposed to interfaith theological dialogue, but interestingly enough, he seems to have much more of an interest, at least certainly in Christianity. I'm talking about other religions, but certainly Christian theologians and Christian theology than Rabbi Sacks. And also, I appreciate Alon's paper, which I thought was a great paper, not least because I think it supports my view. No, because when you spoke about how not just the specifics of religion, but how it supports the civic virtues, I mean, that's exactly the question which I said Rabbi Soloveitchik would raise, whether the interfaith dialogue, the addressing general society leads to downplaying the Adam too, the specificities of the religious experience in terms of Adam 1, which is the civic and cultural virtues. So actually, I think what you said actually supports and fits in with my contention earlier this morning.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to take a little bit of I'm going to encourage my students to be a bit daring here. So the one possibility, I have two students in mind to call upon. One of them is Shira, if she would like to, or Alexandra. Alexandra is a prime example of someone who is extremely thoughtful. She was an excellent student of mine in international relations, and she is from the Russian Federation, and is dealing with a multiplicity of exposure to different identities. Okay, so I'd simply like to ask you, what have you found meaningful in these presentations, or anything that sticks in your mind?
I was really fascinated how I think it's the first time that I saw a religious person being critical towards Rabbi, and this is really critical in a science way, and it was really for me as somebody who does study religion, for me it was because I know about the Rabbi Sacks and I read about him, I know what he's doing, and even though maybe I don't agree with it, I think he's a great learner too, and a great teacher, but it was really interesting for me to see how you can consider Torah and religion in the scientific way, because the way that I know religion, and I know like a little bit of older religion because of my upbringing, for me it was always a little bit scary to go into religion because for me it was like very far from the science, and science was very prominent in my family, and after this, I think after all the presentation that I really was interested to see how you see it from the philosophical way, and I'm going to see it from as a subject of as a literature and as a science too. And I really think that it's made me kind of be more open to this, because I'm still thinking, I think I take like the second course, in my second year here, I'm taking the second course about dialogues. Last year I took the Jewish dialogue because I'm trying so hard to find something there, and I think maybe I did. So thank you so much, guys.
10% extra.
Definitely bonus for participation, without a doubt. Okay, thank you for being the Joshua, or the what they say, Nachshon, the pioneer. Okay, Shira, you want to take a stab at some comment or something, or some reflection that you had in your mind?
Well, I told her I wasn't sure if it's appropriate or not, but I did appreciate the topics that were raised here, and like the just being open to other religions, learning about other religions, finding the otherness. But I was, as an international student, I'm wondering if this is like, if we need to reach like the university in order to start thinking on these levels, or is this taught in Israeli society? Like, I would want this to be part of the deeper Israeli society. I'm wondering if
Barbara, you sort of touched on Israeli society. Do you want to maybe relate to that?
Yeah, I think we need you to bring this a lot of encouragement. I think we, in Israeli society now, we need a lot of encouragement from the outside to get into a better shape again.
so the answer is no.
No, we have I think we're, yeah.
Look, what I
We
can't.
have a panel dedicated to this.
Right.
Tomorrow evening.
Right. But the fact of the matter is this very thought, the very idea of this conference, and maybe we'll sort of, I guess, wrap up the session. The very presence of this conference, the taking place of this conference in relation to the center, is exciting, and this is happening at Bar Ilan University, so that is going to be on the map, and. Yeah, no, I understand that, but at least, it may be filtered down. And I would say something else from my own, involvement with different sectors in Israeli society, more so now with the secular than I've had before. I'm learning to the extent that religion has such a bad image in Israeli society. Such a bad image. It's unbelievable. I was astounded. And someone like Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who represents that committed religion but also enlightenment together, is really something that we need. Ma'an, any reflections? Any reflections on this? Any reaction? Anything you felt in your mind or heart? This discussion today. Okay, I think on that note, thank you so much. Shukran Katir, okay? And all the best. And thank you all for the opportunity.
Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, for all those who want to run.